This gospel passage provides for us an example of a popular storytelling technique that's used throughout Mark's gospel, and it's the story sandwich method. And here we have Jesus on the way to do something, and then something happens that stops it, and he stops to do something else, and then continues on to do what he set out to do. I rather like this storytelling method because I feel it's rather apt as a description of what life is like. I'm sure many of you can relate to being on the way to something very important, and at some point along the way you're stopped, maybe by a child, a spouse, a friend, someone, and you're on your way to do something that is the most important thing in the world, and they stop you and say, the thing that's important to you doesn't matter because I have something that's important to me that I need you to deal with right now. And I need you to focus on me, and then you can get back to doing that thing. I'm sure many of you have had that happen at least once or twice or 50 times in your life. And I know usually I'm so focused on what I'm going to do that when I'm interrupted like that, I'm barely present in what's going on. I give it maybe half if I'm generous with half of my attention. Like, okay, your problem, this solution, okay, I'm back on to doing what I was going to do. But that's not how Jesus responds. In this story, Jesus stops everything. Turns around, who touched my clothes? And you can see why the disciples would think this is a ridiculous question. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of people pressing in from all sides. Everyone is touching your clothes, Jesus. What do you mean, who touched you? Every single one. He touched you, she touched you, he touched you, I touched you. What do you mean? But there was something different about this touch. Because this wasn't just the normal jostling of a crowd. This was a touch with intent, a touch with purpose. And Jesus felt that touch and knew that something significant had happened and stopped and was fully present in that moment to address what had happened. If only you and I had the patience to be fully present in the moment and fully address what's going on in our lives when we're interrupted. Because the truth is, there will always be interruptions. There will always be something else that needs to happen. We can't get away from it. Interruptions are a part of life. And this is especially significant because it involves touch. And I fully believe that touch is the most important of our five senses. We experience touch all the time. And it's so incredibly sensitive. I was reading the other day that there is a new study that has shown that the human touch is so sensitive that a finger being dragged across a surface can detect the difference, the thickness of a single molecule. But they had done a study where they put two pieces of silica next to each other, and they specifically engineered the silica so that one piece was only one molecule thicker than the other. And a statistically significant number of people were able to detect the difference and where it changed from one thickness to another. That is insanely delicate for the human touch to detect. And if you think about the sacraments of the church, and for those of you who don't remember how we define sacraments in the Episcopal Church, it's an outward and visible sign of inward and spiritual grace, which is a fancy church word of saying it's something that you can sense that reminds you of God. It's something that you sense with one of your senses that lets you know God's there. so many of the sacraments involve touch in some way, shape, or form. In baptism, there's water that's poured over the head of the person to be baptized. When people are confirmed, the bishop lays hands on them to welcome them into the body of Christ, into the church. When two people are standing before God's altar to get married, they take one another's hands into their own to hold each other's hands for the sacrament of holy matrimony. There's another fun church word that's unction, which basically is a fancy church word of saying laying on of hands for healing. Ordination is when not only the bishop, but all gathered priests come and stand around the person to be ordained and lay their hands on that person's shoulders and head. And 8 years later, I can still feel the weight of those hands that ordained me when I became a priest. Touch is so significant. Touch is sacred. We realize that it's so sensitive that everything that we experience with touch can remind us of God's presence. From hugging a friend, to the gentle caress of a lover, to shaking hands with the people that you see before you today. Everything can be a reminder of God's presence. And sadly, just as it can be a reminder of God's presence, it can also be abused. Something that is so sacred can be abused through violence, unwanted, unwarranted touch. And it's a bit sad that all too often as a society, we're more than happy to either condone or ignore an abuse of sacred touch. But I don't think we can remain silent on this. I don't think this is an issue we can just sit by and say someone else will take care of it. I think you and I need to intentionally take a stance and call out an abuse of touch wherever we see it, in whatever way it manifests. Whether it's through seeing violence perpetrated on others, whether it's seeing excessive force used in situations where easily it could be de-escalated or solved in a more calm, respectful, and dignified manner. Whether we see unwanted touch being perpetrated on others and we either call it out and stop it, or we make sure that the appropriate justice is exacted upon those who abuse touch, and that people don't just get a free pass. Because every time we let it go, we're allowing others to take something that God made sacred and turn it into something profane. And that's something that you and I should not be able to abide. So this morning, I invite you to recognize how sacred touch is. And where it's appropriate, I invite you to shake hands, hug, embrace, hold hands with the people that are close to you as they are willing to let you in. But also to be vigilant and see where in our society touch is being abused. I especially want to call your attention to an art display that's in our parish hall right now that is made by women who have been victims of human trafficking. And they have taken all of their experiences and they have poured them in some way into art that's currently on display in our parish hall. I invite you to take some time and look at the art and think of the women who have created it. And then think of the abuse of sacred touch that they have experienced and have had to fight to overcome. And realize that it's not just some esoteric concept that happens maybe to someone sometime, but it's happening each and every day right here in our own city. And there's something we could be doing about it. So I invite you to be very intentional and realize we can make a difference for people who really need us to stand up for them. We can't sit on the sidelines and wait for someone else to do it. Because God's calling us today. God is interrupting our life today to say there's something you need to do. And you can't do it half-heartedly. You can't give just a portion of yourself to it. I need you to focus 100% on this today. Let's reclaim sacred touch and restore something that should be holy so that it can be holy for everyone, not just a few. Amen.
Amen.